The day I found that letter, I had only gone up to the attic to look for Christmas ornaments. I wasn't looking for answers, I wasn't looking for pain, but that dusty cardboard box had other plans for me. 25 years of marriage, a life I thought I understood completely, and in 30 seconds, holding a folded piece of paper that smelled faintly of my mother-in-law's perfume, everything I believed crumbled in my hands. My name isn't important. What matters is that I'm 53 years old, standing in a suburban house in Ohio that I've lived in for over 2 decades, and I am only now beginning to understand the life I actually lived versus the one I thought I had. My husband, Dan, and I got married in 1999. We were young, hopeful. We had a small church wedding, 40 people, a cake that leaned a little to the left. We laughed about that cake for years. It became one of our stories, one of our things. And for a long time, we were good. 2 kids, a mortgage, the usual chaos. We fought sometimes, over money, over how I worked too much, over how he retreated into himself when things got hard. But I thought that was marriage. I thought every couple had their version of this. What I didn't know, what I couldn't have known, was that a secret had been buried between us since the very beginning. But that wasn't the worst part. The last few years have been hard in ways that are difficult to explain to someone who hasn't lived them. Both of our parents are aging. My mother had a fall 2 years ago and needed full-time care. My father-in-law was diagnosed with dementia. We became the sandwich generation overnight, caregiving for our parents while watching our own kids leave for college. Our youngest, Maya, moved to Austin last spring. The house got quiet in a way I wasn't prepared for. Dan and I found ourselves sitting across from each other at the dinner table most nights, eating in near silence. Not angry silence, just empty silence. The kind that builds over years when 2 people stop asking each other real questions. I started seeing a therapist in January, Dr. Elaine. She was the one who first asked me, "What do you actually want?" I sat with that question for 3 sessions before I could answer it. And then, 3 weeks ago, I went up to the attic for Christmas ornaments. The box I opened wasn't labeled well. It was an old moving box from 1999, taped shut with the kind of brown packing tape that turns brittle after 20 years. When I peeled back the flap, I expected tinsel, old photo albums maybe, the kind of clutter that accumulates when you're too busy living to sort through the past. Instead, I found a shoebox inside, and inside the shoebox, wrapped in a rubber band that had long since dried and cracked, were letters. Not love letters to me, not love letters from me. They were from Dan, addressed to someone named Claire. There were 7 of them, all dated between 1997 and 1999, before we got married, before he proposed, right in the middle of when we were first falling in love. I sat down on the cold attic floor. My hands were shaking. The dust was thick and the light was dim, and I remember thinking very clearly that I didn't want to read them. I read every single one. The letters were beautiful. That's the part that gutted me. Dan is not an expressive man. He never has been. In 25 years of marriage, I could count on one hand the number of times he'd written me anything longer than a birthday card. I used to tease him about it. I used to say he had feelings the way other people have receipts, somewhere in a drawer, crumpled, hard to find. But these letters were different. He wrote about missing her, about lying awake at night thinking about her laugh. He wrote about a trip they had taken to the Virginia coast and how he had wanted to stop time on a Tuesday afternoon watching her read on the beach. He used words I didn't know he owned. I wish I had found these letters before I read them. That's a strange thing to say, but there's a kind of knowledge you can't unknow, and sitting in that attic, I felt the full weight of it settling into my chest. My mind went immediately to the darkest place. Was our entire marriage built on a lie? Had he settled for me? Had he always been thinking of her, in the quiet moments, over that dinner table silence, in 25 years of Tuesday nights? I didn't go downstairs for 2 hours. I just sat there with those letters in my lap, crying in a way I hadn't cried since my mother's surgery.
Not graceful crying, the ugly kind, the kind where you don't care anymore what you look like. What I discovered next changed everything. The last letter in the stack was different from the others. It wasn't addressed to Claire. It was addressed to me. My name in his handwriting on an envelope I had never seen. It was dated June 14th, 1999, 6 weeks before our wedding. I almost didn't open it. Part of me, the part that had already been through enough that afternoon, wanted to put all it back in the box, tape it shut, and go downstairs and pretend I had found tinsel. But I opened it. The letter was 3 pages long. His handwriting was messier than usual, like he'd written fast, like he needed to say something before he lost his nerve. He wrote about Claire. He told me in that letter that he had loved her, deeply, for 2 years, that she had been his first real love, and that she had died. A car accident, January of 1999. She was 26 years old. He wrote that he spent the months after her death not knowing how to be alive, and that meeting me 3 months later felt like something he hadn't earned and didn't deserve. He wrote that he fell in love with me while still grieving her, that he never told me because he was ashamed, because he thought if I knew, I would think I was just a replacement, a stand-in for someone he had lost. He wrote, "I need you to know that I chose you. Not because I stopped loving her, but because grief and love can exist at the same time. And what I feel for you is real. It is its own thing. It has always been its own thing. I just didn't know how to say it out loud." He sealed the letter. He never gave it to me. He had put it in a box in the attic and lived with it for 25 years. And I understood, suddenly, completely, why he went sometimes quiet in ways I couldn't reach, why he kept pieces of himself locked behind doors I never had the key to, not because he didn't love me, but because he didn't know how to carry all of it and still let me fully in. I came downstairs with the letter in my hand. Dan was in the kitchen making coffee. I watched something shift in him immediately, the way you can see someone brace themselves for a conversation they've always feared. I didn't yell. I didn't accuse. I sat down at the kitchen table, that same table where we had eaten 1,000 silent dinners, and I slid the letter across to him. He went very still when he saw his own handwriting. And then he sat down across to me, and for the first time in years, maybe in our entire marriage, he told me the truth. All of it, out loud, no editing, no self-protection. He cried in a way I had never seen him cry. We talked for 4 hours that night. About Claire, about grief, about the distance between us, about all the questions we had never asked each other because we were too afraid of what the answers might be. I won't tell you it fixed everything. I won't tell you we woke up the next morning a different couple. That's not how it works. That's not how any of it works at 53. But something cracked open between us that night. Something that needed to crack open a long time ago. And here's what I know now in the weeks since. Grief doesn't disappear when you fall in love with someone new. It just finds a place to live inside you. And sometimes the people we love most are carrying rooms we've never been invited into, not because they're hiding from us, but because they haven't found the words yet. I'm still seeing Dr. Elaine. Dan started seeing someone too. We're learning at 53 how to ask each other real questions. It turns out it's never too late to start. That letter sat in an attic for 25 years, and maybe it needed exactly that long before either of us was ready to read it.